circles that Kevin Durant could be on the move. We've reported that Phoenix has been willing to listen to offers for him in recent days.
Yeah, things somehow got so bad in Phoenix that they were thinking about trading Mr. Kevin Wayne Durant.
Over the last day or two, there's been some negotiations going on a three-team maneuver between Miami, Golden State, and Phoenix that would have included Jimmy Butler and Kevin Durant.
So now you're getting your name put in trade machines by the media, and not just that, but apparently Phoenix was close to getting a trade done.
The Warriors have been seriously pursuing Kevin Durant over the last week, but sources tell me that Durant has no desire in a reunion with the Warriors. He does not want to go back to the Warriors.
And as many of you know, Phoenix was not trying to trade KD at first. They suddenly had to because of what was happening with Beal. And I gotta give it up to this dude, bro. He didn't want to uproot his family, and he basically held up a lot of trade talks that could have happened with Phoenix, Miami, and Milwaukee, potentially Chicago. And so those other teams had to look elsewhere. Ugh, he looks terrible in the jersey. Number 18, bro, it doesn't even look right. And one thing that was clear with these trade talks involving KD was that KD had no idea that the front office was doing this until he saw it from the media.
And Kevin Durant did not expect his name to be in any trade rumors. He has not requested a trade out of Phoenix this season, from my understanding, and was blindsided by even being involved in any conversation.
And this all came down to the last hour of the deadline, where the Suns had made the Yusuf Nurkic trade, and that was basically the only trade they had made leading up to that deadline. And the Suns, unfortunately, they couldn't get Butler. Not just that, but now they couldn't get KD traded. Now a player that's blindsided by all this. And it's like, okay, how many teams actually did call for KD? Like, how real was all the chatter about this guy getting traded? Why would you trade a guy like Kevin Durant, who's had a legendary career where he's averaged 26.9 points per game this season? Not just that, he's doing that at 36 years old, mind you. Like, I don't think many people expected his name to even pop up this deadline.
Memphis knows what he said, because that's why they tried on Jimmy Butler.
Yes.
They tried on Kevin Durant. Problem is, this is what I hate saying, is like those guys said no.
That was kind of just news that just came out of Bob's mouth there about Memphis and Kevin Durant. But
well, look,
Windy right there with the news. Hey, blabbermouth here. Bob Myers couldn't keep his mouth shut about this. Kevin Durant probably told him about the Grizzly situation, how he said no. So you're telling me KD could have been a Grizzly had KD not stepped in and said no? You're telling me we could have seen part 2 of Curry KD tandem if KD said yes? Apparently, after a recent Suns-Warriors game, KD and Steph both met in secret to talk about this whole issue. And KD apparently told Steph that it didn't feel right and that it wasn't the time for those two to revisit their basketball partnerships. Interesting. And as we know, the Warriors acquired Jimmy Butler in a big blockbuster trade. And so far, they're 2-0 with Jimmy Butler playing. So things are going good for them. But I'm sure KD now doesn't feel so good about his tenure in Phoenix long term.
It's just business, man. It's just part of the business, you know. Everybody's bought and sold in this league, you know, so anybody could be up for auction. You know what I mean? So I understand that.
And now KD, it doesn't seem like he's, too frustrated by this. But contrary to what he says here, I mean, those reports even back in December that KD was frustrated after that loss against Denver. And KD basically said, yeah, we're all frustrated. We could have played better. And as we know, the Phoenix Suns started the season hot, winning 8 of their first 9 games. And then KD got hurt and they started losing more games without him. If you're a Suns fan, look away, because now you're in the standings where the Warriors now are starting to win games with Jimmy Butler now in the lineup. And apparently even the media is starting to talk about how toxic the locker room is in Phoenix.
When the smoke clears from the trade deadline, the Suns are really going to have a challenge on their hands as far as picking up the pieces and moving forward and trying to make a run toward the end of the season.
This is something that would be incredibly difficult to recover from.
Yeah, the word I would use, I mean, he said glum, I'll use toxic.
Wow.
like that shoot around yesterday I heard was very awkward, very weird in Oklahoma City because everybody was on pins and needles wondering what they were going to do. And I think now you have this reset where how do you move forward as a team when there was a clear mandate here, like they have to do something.
In ESPN, they heard that word toxic from Ramona. They put down the lower third. Ramona, situation in Suns locker room is toxic right now. Oh, that's the juicy headline they were all looking for this whole time. And of course, you knew KD was going to be asked about this later on.
Yeah, I heard Ramona Shelburne come out and say our locker room is toxic. And I try to tell people who's not around this game as much, is that it's easy to say our locker room is not connected when you come in there 45 minutes before and guys are in their game modes. We're not talking to each other. 4 or 5 guys might be in the training room. A few guys might be in the weight room. It's not a welcoming environment right before the game. You know what I'm saying? And that's just part of getting ready to play.
And that's a fair response for KD to say, look, man, like you don't know what's going on in these locker rooms. The only time you show up is before the games when guys are tense, trying to get their game face ready and stuff. But at the same time, there's so much smoke, so much noise hinting at KD just not being too happy hearing his name being thrown around in trade discussions. Not just that, but the Phoenix Suns front office apparently not even telling him before the media had basically got KD's English. I can't speak English. I think what's crazy here is that there's so much noise about Kevin Durant's name being thrown around that, something has to be true about this, right? The media isn't just saying all this because it's all cap, right? You could say, oh, Ramona is exaggerating. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But at the same time, so many people are also confirming that, things are awkward over there now. You're telling me one of the big reasons we didn't see a KD reunion with the Warriors is because KD said no to it? You're telling me the reason Phoenix doesn't have Jimmy Butler right now is because KD didn't want to go to Golden State? And you're telling me the Grizzlies were also throwing in a pitch to try to get KD, but KD said no to that too? Oh, and after the trade deadline concluded, we're hearing that Minnesota had a late-dish effort to try to make a trade for Kevin Durant? I love this Grok thing suggesting, oh, what was the trade offer? I mean, that's what we all want to know. If I were to guess, it would be centered about Julius Randle and whatnot. But that's not the point. That's not why we're talking about this today. Because according to Dan Le Batard recently, he basically said the Suns were asking for too much to where the Heat was like, nah, we're not going to give you all that for Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler. Are we serious? Apparently, they wanted the whole Miami Heat team at that point. At that point, the Heat were like, what the hell are we even doing? We're not giving up Bam for a 36-year-old Kevin Durant. But I think KD, even in that same presser where he talked about the Ramona Shelburne report, and even in the presser where he talked about the very same trade that happened to where it's part of the business, he also was blindsided by this, and he even admitted to such.
I didn't see it coming, but the organization got to do what they got to do for the betterment of their organization. Even if I'm blindsided or not, it doesn't matter. It's just part of the business.
I think KD handled this whole situation really well. He made, he outlined that he was, admittedly blindsided, but that, players have to be prepared for everything. And, he didn't really try to, blame anybody or throw anybody under the bus, which is good. But you have to imagine that, the relationship with the front office and Kevin Durant and also the owner as well. It probably won't be the same anymore.
Can you give us an idea, Kevin, what it's like to go through something like that and then have to come back and then act like, just everything's fine again? That seems like that would be tough.
No, because my teammates, my coaches, they're not the ones that's having these conversations. It's usually the front office and the people that I don't really see as much as my teammates and coaches. So yeah, I can lock in on the task at hand and focus on the team and my coaching staff as much as I can, because that's the most important thing. And like I said, let the business take care of itself. And whoever called me and tell me I need to go, then I got to go. But if I can, like I said, I wanted to stay here and figure this thing out and see this thing through. So if I can get in the way of something like a trade, then why not? So
well, that game that he had the next day was against the Utah Jazz. He didn't play in that game. Not just that, he didn't play in the next game against the Nuggets. And look, Kevin Durant might play tonight. I think today's the 10th or the 11th. and I think he might play tonight against the Memphis Grizzlies. I think things are lining up toward this is going to be his first game since all the hoopla was happening. But again, KD, I don't think he's lying at all. I don't think he's lying. I don't think he's trying to miss words. I think he's just stating it as it is. And Bob Myers, him basically saying what KD probably told him, or somebody in his camp told him about the Grizzlies potentially trying to trade for him. That's between KD and the front office. I think KD is basically trying to make sure that he doesn't leave Phoenix because, again, he wanted to play in Phoenix long term.
No, I always had a goal of just playing my contract out and seeing what happens. I can't focus on a year and a half down the line. I try to focus on the day ahead of me, and I know that'll be a topic. That's probably the most frustrating part.
And I'm sure now KD's frustrated at the front office for having his name being dragged out like this now. He knows, okay, yeah, I'm going to play with my guys, my coach, but those guys at the top, even Ishbia, the guy who promised KD being a lifer in Phoenix.
Kevin Durant's an amazing player, an amazing guy, and we're so lucky to have him.
He was extension eligible for the start of the season. You guys didn't do an extension with him. He is eligible for a 2-year deal this offseason. Why didn't an extension happen before the season? Where are you guys at with Kevin Durant now? How do you view the next few months and next offseason with him?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, extension, not extension, is that we have a great relationship with Kevin. Kevin Durant is a great guy. He loves being in Phoenix. We love having him. He's done a great thing. He's off to an amazing start this season. I think one of the MVP leaders, and we're off to a very good start. Kevin's been great. And so we expect Kevin to sign an extension, be with us for the long term. We hope he finishes his career here in Phoenix. That's what we expect.
Ishbia, he tried excusing this, lack of an extension by saying, oh, there's CBA rules that prevented us from signing a long-term extension. They could have signed a 1 or 2-year extension, but they didn't want to do that. And he reaffirms that him and KD, there's no rumblings of any division, any, sort of tension between the two.
We figured, hey, after the season, we'll talk about it, we'll take care of it. But Kevin wants to be here. We want Kevin here. There's been never even one grumbling of anything different, although some people like to report that. Never been a situation. Kevin and I have a great relationship. We get along with his agent. He gets along with Devin and Coach Bud. Everyone gets along great, and we're excited for Kevin. But right now, let's focus on this year, and then we'll take care of that stuff in the summer.
And by the way, this interview took place on November and was published on ESPN, on November 19th. So it's very recently where Ishbia promised that KD and him, they were all solid and that there's no grumblings, as he says here. But I'm sure now things have changed since, his name has been brought up in reports of trade talks. He didn't expect it to happen, but he knew at some point it could happen. He was probably surprised that it happened this soon, right? And him saying that he wanted to play his contract out was basically him saying, yo, I'm committed to this team for as long as my contract is up. And at that point, I'm pretty sure if none of this trade talk stuff happened with him, that he would probably stay with Phoenix long term. But because now the team's struggling and the media is now basically putting a microscope under Phoenix's entire roster, they're going to look at everybody's body language. They're going to look at Kevin Durant. And Kendrick Perkins is back to hating on Kevin Durant again. We've seen how this movie ends. Kevin Durant this summer is most likely going to either request out or there's going to be a mutual agreement between Phoenix and Kevin Durant to where, long term, this is not sustainable. Kevin Durant's going to see himself out of Phoenix because the chatter is just getting to a point where I think Kevin Durant himself is getting tired of it. He knows, okay, this is too much now. Y'all have betrayed me, quote unquote. You've blindsided me at the very least. And honestly, if you're KD, you should have seen this coming earlier than expected. You should have seen the writing on the wall where teams like Memphis were, obviously competing for a, playoff spot in the Western Conference, and Phoenix, despite having a big three of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, despite that, they're at 500 in February. They're at 5. This is not a good position to be in. I know the Western Conference is very tight to where it's like they're 3 games behind the 6-seed Clippers, right? So, like, in theory, the Suns aren't worried too much. They shouldn't be that worried. They just need to win a couple games, right? You just need to win a couple of these. Unfortunately, according to Tankathon here, the Phoenix Suns have the remaining toughest schedule in the NBA. And they're the only team to where all the columns of easiest opponents is getting smaller and smaller for Phoenix as they've just played the Utah Jazz recently for the last time this season. And the only opponents that are very easy left are the Spurs, the Bulls, the Raptors, and the Pelicans. Oh boy. And meanwhile, they got a game against the Thunder coming up, a game against the Caps coming up, 2 games against the Celtics, 3 more games against the Grizzlies. Are we serious? Yeah, they've got the toughest schedule in the NBA, and guess what? It's looking more and more likely this team won't even make the play-in. I mean, honestly, which games do you see the Phoenix Suns winning? Realistically, with the squad they have, Beal has been out with some injury, a toe injury recently. Devin Booker, it looks like he's coming back to his old form, but at the same time, he has not had a good season, to his liking. I don't think they'll beat Memphis, Houston, maybe the Spurs. I'll give them that one. That's one game. The Bulls, you know what? I'll give them the edge to go over the Bulls. Into Toronto Raptors? Yeah, why not? Okay, so they might have a good stretch of games here after the All-Star break where they can go on a streak. But if they lose even one of those games, it's peril. It's going to be in the headlines. Oh my God, Phoenix lost to who? But then after the Grizzlies, they have a stretch against the Pelicans where they play back-to-back. So maybe you can get both or at least one win, right? So, okay, those are teams you can see beating. So already that's 5 wins in 8 games if things go the way they should go. But they have a stretch coming up after that in March where they play the Timberwolves, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Grizzlies, the Rockets. And look, the Kings, even if you think they could beat the Kings, I'm not sure about that anymore. The Lakers, oh my, this stretch in March is brutal. And then they play the Raptors. You know what? I'll give them the Raptors game, but you can't lose both the Raptors and the Pelicans games, okay? You got to win at least 3 of the 4 games against those two teams. Then the Bulls, okay, you know what? That's the game you might win. But then you got the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Celtics, the Timberwolves, the Rockets, again the Bucks, the Celtics, the Knicks, the Warriors, and the Thunder. And the last game of the season between the Spurs and the Kings, you know what? Maybe you'll beat the Spurs and the Kings because it's like a regular season finale. And let's add up some of these, wins and losses to see how much win and loss would Phoenix have at the end of the season. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's 9 wins of the last, let's see here, 30 games that are remaining. There's 30 games remaining for the Phoenix Suns. If they win 9 of the 30 games, that's obviously a bad record for them. They would be 9 and, let's see here, 9 and 11? No, sorry, 9 and 21 in the remaining schedule, which would give them a record of 35 and, let's see here, 47, which is obviously a under 500 record. And as you can see, every team that is in the playoff or playing in is above 500. So that means the Phoenix Suns would be on pace to miss the play-in if, I give them the generous wins. Those are the generous ones, okay? They could be the Boston on their off day, or they could be the Lakers team that's just, trying to rest their players. But even the generous wins, they're just slightly under 500, right? A 35-47 record is a 0.427 percentage, which would put them just above the 13th seed right now if, teams win at the current pace that they're winning at. And that means this Phoenix Suns would have to do something this summer. Kevin Durant would have to look elsewhere because this team clearly has no ceiling that is reachable, that is going to satisfy Kevin Durant's ambitions of winning a championship outside of Golden State. And that's the reality check that I think KD needed. This is rude. It's tough. Obviously, it's a business like he says. But look, your time in Phoenix is going to soon come to an end because I think everyone now knows this is not the team that's going to win a championship. Phoenix said as much by trying to trade Yusuf Nurkic, which they did, and by trying to trade Beal, which they couldn't. So then they tried trading KD, and again, they couldn't do that. That's basically an admission that this Suns team is not good enough and that they had to make moves, but unfortunately, they couldn't make those same moves. And because it's hard to imagine a guy of KD's caliber being moved at the deadline, now it's more likely that he gets moved in the summer because clearly things aren't working right now. And as I outlined, I don't expect this season to turn around. I don't expect Phoenix to make the playoffs. They might make the play-in on some, miracle that they go on if they go on a run. But I think everyone knows now that KD's time in Phoenix is going to end soon. And that's just something that Phoenix is going to have to now take care of because they butchered this entire deadline. And really, I'll get into this in a big later project during the playoffs, during the summer. How this is the Suns' fault, the owner's fault, everyone in that top brass. It's their fault that they're in the situation. And when that video comes out, I promise you, it's going to be a big one, man. But until then, have a great one. Peace out.